Hey everybody, we're going to another one of my lists here with the solo Beatles. Yeah, this is my last day off before I gotta get back to work tomorrow for the holiday. So, let's make some more videos. I did Paul, George, and Ringo, so we leave John for last. Unfortunately, what's really frustrating whenever you do a John Lennon essay or video or something, you realize the harsh fact that John left us too early, so or just taken from us too early. So therefore, we don't have a lot of catalog material of him for the solo years. So what we have to do is make the best we can do. So I only had 8 official studio albums really for John to list, and I wanted to get at least 10 albums for this. So I wound up throwing in a live album and another kind of hodgepodge made after his death. So try to get at least 10 albums here. None of these albums that I'm going to list I would consider bad albums. Just albums that I would list in order of my personal favorite and least favorite down to favorite. So we're going to start with number 10. I picked this. It's an album posthumously released after John's passing in 1986. It's called Menlove Avenue. And it's not really remembered that much. It basically has sessions for the Walls and Bridges album and also from the rock and roll sessions. Songs that hadn't been out yet, different versions of things. And you know, there's some good stuff on here. You finally get Angel Baby, which was from the rock and roll album sessions that was only available as the Animate Limited television album. It wasn't on the official rock and roll album, so that's good. There's other songs too. We got Rock and Roll People, Here We Go Again. I like the version of Steel and Glass here, which is a lot quieter and mellower. It's a Steel and Glass, easy-going version, kind of, compared to what was on the Walls and Bridges album. Anyway, so this is 10. Then we're going to go to what I put as number 9, as Lennon would say, number 9, number 9. I decided to put Live Peace in Toronto from 1969. And the only reason, or maybe one of 2 reasons that I put it this high, you know, or low, depending how you want to look at it, you know, back this far, is because I'm just not really a fan of live albums. Some I enjoy, some I don't enjoy, some I like more or less than others. But when given a choice, I'll always pick an album that's a studio album, for the most part. You know, John played with Eric Clapton, you know, and Yoko, of course, was there for scenery more than anything. And this was his first real project, serious project away from the Beatles in September of '69. And side 1 is all the John Lennon vocals, which are pretty good. You get him doing oldies stuff like Dizzy Miss Lizzie and Blue Suede Shoes, and he does Your Blues, the Beatles' White Album song, and Give Peace a Chance, which I don't think was a 45 yet. I think it was debuted here. I could be wrong, but I think that's the case. And you know, the song Money from, you know, Beatles' Money that they did cover. And it's okay. I mean, I think John sings them kind of half-heartedly. I just, you know, I think he's nervous, and I think it shows. Side 2, of course, People Dismiss, myself included, really. Side 2 is a couple of Yoko songs. Now, I have no real need for the song John, John, Let's Hope for Peace, but I really don't mind Don't Worry Kyoko, because I think that the backing is really good, even though it goes on and it's monotonous. I like the sound of the guitars and the music, especially when you watch the film footage of this and you get to see John and Eric Clapton playing the guitar. So this is number 9. Then for number 8, I put the Rock and Roll collection, Rock and Roll. And the reason I do that, again, is mostly because I prefer to hear John's studio stuff. It's not bad, this album. I did a review on this in my regular Beatles review series, if you want to look at it. Some songs here I like better than others. Some of them are just horrendous covers. I mean, I really don't like John's version of Ya Ya. I don't really like, and some of the other ones are pretty good. I don't know. A lot of people don't like Sweet Little 16, the Chuck Berry version here. It's kind of what he calls it, the dance hall version, John called it. I kind of like that. I don't know why, but anyway, I don't know. Something happened with John's voice too during this album. I just didn't think it sounded as strong as when he was with the Beatles while he did these songs. But again, you know, I like it better than Paul's Russian rock and roll album. Paul, how do you sleep at night? Sorry, I couldn't resist. Get the music on, you know. Then we got number 7. Number 7, I'm going to put Milk and Honey. 1984 release after John's death. This is the songs that were left from John when they had done Double Fantasy. And, you know, some of the songs are pretty good. I mean, I love Borrowed Time, and I love I don't Want to Face It. I didn't do a review on this yet, so I want to leave a more of dissection of the tracks for that review, except to say that it's not as good as Double Fantasy. You can't blame John for it, you know. I mean, his songs weren't completed. So I appreciate Yoko putting it out, trying to make an album out of it. So we had the music, but not as good as Double Fantasy. Then you get album number 6. I wonder if some people are gonna find it hard to believe I put this ahead of the last couple albums. This is a 1972 album, often considered John's worst album, Sometime in New York City. I really admire John for taking a stand, and I did a full review on this, about 25 minutes long. Please check it out. All I could say about this is that, I don't know, John's heart was in the right place, Yoko's heart was in the right place. They were a little naive. The songs were dated very quickly, and today the songs are really dated. But this is supposed to be a newspaper printout of the time, just like any newspaper. That's what they call it, Sometime, like the Times, New York City. It's what was going on at the time they were recording. So they kind of did a commentary on it. And some of the songs here are good, you know. I love Woman is the N-Word of the World. I love the rock song New York City, one of John's best rockers ever. And John Sinclair has a nice sound to it. Angela has a nice sound to it. And I like a couple of Yoko songs here a lot myself. I think all of them, really. There's been a couple. They're pretty good for Yoko. It's an underrated album, but something has to come on the bottom. I realize that. So now we get into the top 5 as we round out to this outtake of How Do You Sleep. So let's just finish this up. Yep. Gonna bounce it to another track. Just have something different. Okay, the top 5. Unfortunately, John was gone too early, so we don't have a lot of albums by him, and I think I'm pretty sure that this will be in most people's top 5. The only difference will be what kind of order they would kind of put them in, and that was not easy for a couple of these albums. Number 5, I put Double Fantasy. It was really great in 1980 for John to do a comeback. We'd waited a long time for him to go back in the studio. I was very excited in the summer of 80 when I heard the news John was back in the studio. And I remember seeing a teaser, this picture here on the back in my record store. They had a picture of John and Yoko stepping off the curb in New York City, a spot where I've stood in myself a few times, by the Dakota building, the side of the Dakota building. And anyway, it was just so great to have John back. I did a review on this album also, if you want to check it out. I'll go to more detail. But at the time, I thought, you know, this is kind of like, it was great to hear John's voice. His voice sounded great, but I thought the material at the time, I was only 18, I thought was kind of weak. But now that I'm old enough to appreciate a relationship album like this, I think it's a good dialogue. And Yoko's songs, I said it before, I'll say it now, were really an amazing awakening as far as I was concerned. A lot of them were very current with the time, very new wave oriented and hip, for lack of a better word. And I like her stuff on this album. So anyway, solid number 5. Now number 4. number 4, I went with Mind Games. I'm just going to bounce to the next track. Okay, this is Mind Games, a 1973 release. This is an album that gets slighted a lot. It gets forgotten because, I don't know. I keep plugging my own reviews, but I did a full review of this one if you want to check it out. I like this album. I love the title song, Mind Games. It may be my favorite John Lennon solo song, or as far as the hits, the singles, you know, my favorite John Lennon single. Well, it's hard to say. I like Instant Karma a lot too. Mind Games hasn't become overplayed and played out, and doesn't deify John unintentionally, as Imagine does now, the song, when you hear it. It's an underrated. Okay, album number 3, I go for Walls and Bridges. Now, the top 3 albums I can put in any kind of order. I mean, it's hard to pick. I often call this my favorite John Lennon album. In fact, I think I did somebody, I don't know if it was Adam Nichols. I'm sorry, I might not remember. But whoever it was, I did a top few albums from John. I put this, I think, number 1 just to be different. I really love this album, and I haven't done a proper review of this yet. And when I do, I got a lot to say about it and why I like it so much. But just briefly, I like it that this is the one album. I'm always defending Yoko. I'll always defend Yoko from the perspective of she was John's woman, and because I love John and we respect John as fans, we have to just live with the fact that Yoko was what he needed and made him happy, and for better or worse to us as fans. But this album, what I liked about it was John just being a solo artist by himself again, really, without Yoko's influence. And this is probably the only album, really, where you get that feeling, you know? Even though there's a song that's at least one song that's dedicated to her. The song Bless You is actually dedicated to, sorry about this song, these are outtakes, not all of them are great. So I'm looking for what I can find. Anyway, John didn't intend anybody to hear these, so I'll leave it on in the background. But anyway, yeah, number 3, good solid commercial album. It has John's only number 1 hit while he was alive, Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Now, we know what the next 2 albums are. I say that at the end of everything. Anybody who's a fan knows. But the question is, what order do we put the albums in? I mean, these next 2 are often considered John's best without question. But what order do you put them in? And that's where they get flip-flopped a lot. Well, I put this at number 2. I decided to go with his debut album, Plastic Ono Band. Although John says these albums are titleless in one of his last interviews. They don't really have any title, he says, you know, but they call it John Lennon Plastic Ono Band. This is a masterpiece, in my opinion. This is John screaming his heart out and pouring his heart out when he's not screaming, just singing it. And basically talking about all the pain and all the unhappiness he's felt his whole life that he needed to vent. And that's what he did on this album. And it's in a lot of ways, this is the best thing critically that John ever did. In a lot of ways, and as far as from his soul, from his heart. There's a lot of emotion in here, a lot of energy. Now, I often say when I talk about this album, and I did a review of it, I was 15 years old the first time I heard this album. I was just blown away by it. I often say I remember listening to it at night. I actually had a bedroom in the front porch with windows around. And I remember listening to this in the dark with headphones on. And I looked at the lyric sheet of this album and just studied the lyrics along with it. And I just couldn't believe the raw emotion of this album, the power, what I felt. And being 15 years old and having situations with, you know, teenage angst and problems and depression now and then and things that kids face, I related to this 100%, and it's like John was speaking to me. And that's how a lot of people feel who like John Lennon, like he was one of us, you know, he understood, you know. Anyway, the difference is, though, these days I can't really get into this album as often because I'm just a lot older now, and from that first listen when I was in the darkened porch with just, you know, some of the moonlight out and the open windows with the trees sitting on the edge of the bed. That's how I always think when I listen to this album. It's a perfect environment and atmosphere for that listen. But these days I don't feel as down as I do that often, to the point where I can really get off on this album. That's the only bad thing about the album, you know, is that in order to really appreciate it, you kind of have to be in the dumps, down in the dumps, I think, for most of the songs. And that's the difference. That's why I put this next album as number one. It's the 1971 Imagine album. And the reason I put this at number one, and by the way, I also reviewed this album, if you want to check back. It's kind of got a lot of the same deep-hearted feelings from the other album I showed, Plastic Ono Band, with the difference being that this time it was a little more commercialized and it was put down a little more, made it a little more palatable for everybody. So I think this is a little more accessible as an album. That's the only reason. I mean, in terms of greatness and a masterpiece, the Plastic Ono Band album is probably number one, deserving of number one. But this one, just for accessibility and more commercial appeal, I would say, for the most part, Imagine is the best album. And wish John was still here. I really wish that we could get more. There's no telling what would have happened if he had stayed around. And I'm just going to lead into that at the end of this video, you know, just muse over some of that. Because could you imagine John on a Saturday Night Live doing some skits? Could you imagine John visiting the Howard Stern radio show? Could you imagine what kind of albums he would have? I can't even imagine it. What would he have done throughout the 80s? You know, imagine the tours. What kind of tours would he have had, you know? Would he have collaborated with Yoko? I mean, it was John and Yoko. That's the only thing that some people might not like, myself included. Even though I defend Yoko, I kind of like the idea when he can branch out on his own once in a while. And I don't know if I like the idea of them being like a kind of like Captain and Tennille for the rest of their careers together, but we'll never know. We were robbed of that. Well, sorry to get so somber about it at the end. Hope you had fun with this, and please comment in the video section here below. Thanks for watching again.